The Garden of Hope and Renewal. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there lived a young prince named Edward. He was kind, generous, and loved by all his people. One day, while taking a walk in the woods, he stumbled upon a beautiful garden he had never seen before. The garden was filled with vibrant flowers, fruit trees, and a sparkling fountain in the center. As he walked closer, he noticed a small cottage nearby. Curious, he approached the cottage and knocked on the door, but no one answered. The prince decided to wait and see if anyone would come out. After a while, an old woman with kind eyes and a warm smile appeared at the door. "Hello, young prince," she said. "What brings you here?" The prince was taken aback for a moment, surprised that the woman knew who he was. "How do you know who I am?" he asked. The woman chuckled softly. "Word travels quickly in these parts, Your Highness," she replied. "But please, do come in and make yourself comfortable. I have some tea brewing, and I would be honored to share a cup with you." Edward was hesitant at first, but the woman's kind demeanor put him at ease. He stepped inside the cozy cottage and took a seat at a small table by the window. The woman brought out a teapot and 2 delicate teacups, and they sat in comfortable silence for a moment as she poured the tea. After a few sips, the prince spoke up. "This garden is beautiful," he said. "Do you tend to it yourself?" The woman nodded. "Yes, I do. It has been my life's work, you might say." "I can tell," said the prince, admiring the colorful flowers and luscious fruit. "It must take a lot of hard work and dedication." The woman smiled. "It does, but it brings me great joy. And speaking of dedication, Your Highness, I have a favor to ask of you." The prince raised an eyebrow, curious. "What kind of favor?" The woman leaned in, her eyes intense. "I need you to help me save this garden." Repeated. "What do you mean?" The woman sighed deeply. "For many years, this garden has been a source of life and beauty for all who live in this land. But now, a great threat looms over it. A wicked sorcerer has placed a curse on the garden, and if we don't break it soon, all the plants and trees will wither and die." Edward's heart sank at the thought of losing such a precious place. "Is there anything I can do to help?" he asked. The woman nodded. "There is. The sorcerer's power comes from an enchanted amulet he wears around his neck. If you can retrieve that amulet and bring it to me, I may be able to break the curse." The prince was hesitant at first. He had never fought a sorcerer before, and he wasn't sure he was up to the task. But something about the woman's kind eyes and the beauty of the garden stirred something deep within him. "Very well," he said at last. "I will do my best to retrieve the amulet and save the garden." The woman smiled, and her eyes glimmered with gratitude. "Thank you, Your Highness," she said. "I believe in you, and I know you can do this." With those words ringing in his ears, the prince set out on his journey to find the sorcerer and retrieve the amulet. He didn't know what dangers lay ahead, but he was determined to save the garden and restore its beauty for generations to come. The prince traveled for many days, through forests and mountains, until he came to a dark and foreboding castle. He knew that the sorcerer he sought was inside. Steeling himself, he walked through the castle gates and into the dimly lit hallways. As he made his way through the castle, he encountered many obstacles, locked doors, treacherous traps, and fierce guardians. But the prince was determined, and he used his wit and bravery to overcome each challenge. Finally, he came face to face with the sorcerer himself. The sorcerer was a tall, gaunt man with piercing eyes and a cruel smile. Well, what have we here?" he sneered. "A foolish prince come to try and stop me?" The prince stood tall, despite the sorcerer's mocking tone. "I have come to retrieve the amulet you wore around your neck," he said. "Give it to me, and I will spare you." The sorcerer laughed. "Spare me? You have no power over me, boy. I am the most powerful sorcerer in all the land." With a wave of his hand, the sorcerer summoned a burst of dark energy that sent the prince flying across the room. But the prince was not defeated yet. He stood up, gritted his teeth, and charged at the sorcerer with all his might. The two battled fiercely, spells flying back and forth between them. The prince was outmatched by the sorcerer's dark magic, but he refused to give up. Finally, with one final burst of energy, he managed to knock the amulet from the sorcerer's neck and grab it before it hit the ground. The sorcerer shrieked in rage and lunged at the prince, but it was too late. The prince had the amulet, and he knew what he had to do. He raced back to the garden, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. When he arrived, the woman was waiting for him, her eyes shining with hope. "Did you get it?" she asked breathlessly. The prince nodded, and he handed her the amulet. "I did. Now, can you break the curse?" The woman nodded, and she began to chant softly, her hands glowing with a warm light. Slowly, the curse began to lift, and the garden came back to life. Flowers bloomed, fruit ripened, and the fountain sparkled once more. The prince watched in wonder as the garden was restored to its former glory. He felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that he had never known before. "Thank you, Your Highness," said the woman, her voice choked with emotion. "You have saved not only this garden, but the hearts of all those who love it." The prince smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. He knew that he had done something truly noble, and that he would always be remembered for it. And so, with his heart full of joy, he returned to his kingdom, eager to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Years passed, and the enchanted garden continued to thrive, becoming a symbol of hope and renewal. People from all over the kingdom made pilgrimages to the garden, seeking its beauty and the sense of peace it brought. The prince's brave deeds had become the stuff of legend, and his legacy lived on in the hearts of the people. He had taught them the true meaning of courage, compassion, and selflessness, and had shown them that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. And so, the prince's story continued to be told, passed down through the generations as a reminder that goodness and kindness can triumph over even the greatest of challenges, and that the legacy of a noble heart can never be forgotten.